therein lies the problem with a lot of skills work. There is a complete lack of definition that cuts through the industry, and people often use the word skill or capability or behavior interchangeably, and it causes them so much confusion. What I was trying to pick holes in is this well-bandied around tagline that all the consultant firms are using, that skills is the new currency of work. Is it? I wanted to talk to all these people that were debating that very point itself. So I've spoken to a lot of companies from Europe, from North America, and from the APAC region, from all different industry sectors, and have been unpacking what they're doing, what they're struggling with, and the conversations have been illuminating.
Welcome to the Work for Humans podcast. This is Dart Lindsley. A few years ago, my friend Gareth Flynn and I were at the Australasian Talent Conference in Sydney when the topic of skills-based management came up. I leaned over and innocently said to him, skills strategies will never work. But what I didn't realize is that he was going on stage a few hours later in front of hundreds of people to present on skills strategies. I wish I could convey to you the look he gave to me. Not to worry, Gareth was able to table my comment for a minute and nailed the presentation, but he was then left with this unsettling question, this nagging concern that maybe skills-based management might be flawed. In a display of real intellectual discipline, he set out on a year-long research journey to uncover the truth. He tracked down dozens of both critics and advocates around the world, and he gained a fresh perspective on when and how skill strategies should or shouldn't be applied in the workplace. And he's here to share those today. Gareth is a writer, a speaker, and a talent and workforce expert with 25 plus years of experience. He's who I go to when I have questions about talent and workforce strategies. As the founder and CEO of TQSolutions, Australia's leading talent and workforce strategy and solutions business, Gareth and his team have advised companies like GE, Philips, Australia Post, and Westpac, among many others. In this episode, Gareth and I talk about how companies approach skills and when they fall short, company motivation for investing in skills strategies, and insights from critics and champions. We also discuss the difference between skills and capabilities, skills taxonomies, career drivers versus life drivers, and other topics. Spoiler alert, Gareth changes my mind in this episode. As always, if you like what you hear today, hit subscribe and be sure to join us for future discussions. And now I bring you my conversation with Gareth Flynn. Gareth Flynn, welcome to Work for Humans.
Great to be here, Dart, and fantastic to join your show, having listened to most of your previous shows.
The path you've been on has been fascinating over the last couple of years, and I'm glad that you are feeling it. You're at the point where you can talk about it publicly. It's been the path of looking at how companies think about skills and how companies use skills, when they work, when they don't, do they ever? And you've talked to, I don't know how many people around the world. You've found people in every corner of every industry, and you've hit them up and you've said, what are you doing with skills? So how did this whole journey start?
It started actually a little bit with you, if I'm really honest. And I have to share this story. It's quite funny, but also part of the origin story. So my business, TQSolutions, have been consulting in skills for a number of years and advising companies on skills strategy. And I just finished a big project in 2023 and was presenting at a conference on skills in Sydney, where you were also present. And just before I went on stage, you tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Gareth, what are you talking on today? I can't remember what you're talking on." And I said, "I'm talking about skills and why skills, the company should be thinking about skills." And he said to me, "Oh, skills, it's all BS. It never works." And this is literally 5 minutes before I went on stage to talk about skills. I remember saying to you, "Look, Dart, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that to me. I'm going to just park it. And then you and I need to have a conversation afterwards," which we did. That was the kind of first pebble that dropped into the water that caused a couple of ripples in my mind.
Timing is everything. I'm glad I placed that just right.
But Dart, it was beautifully timed, if I'm honest, because a couple of weeks later, I went for a walk on my local beach with my dog, Milo, and I walked for 3 hours and I was unplugged. It was just me, the pooch, the beach and the sea. And all I thought about was the vested interests that were in the market related to skills. I thought about the big consulting firms who manage business transformations and change projects and implementation of technology. I thought about the scores of HR tech vendors in skills that are constantly pitching me, who are backed by venture capitalists, who are looking for their next unicorn, who are funded by high net worth individuals who want skills to be a thing. I thought of major industry commentators who operate on a play model, such as Josh Bersin and many others. And this skeptic on my shoulder was saying, is this really a thing? Or have I drunk the Kool-Aid of skills? And I realized on that walk that I'd consumed all this material from all of these people and just assumed it was the right thing to do. And coupled with your comment to me, I actually came back from that walk. We were just about to start another skills project with another customer. And I said to my team, guys, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I need to research this space. I need to have a personal point of view. We need a company point of view. And I'm going to start poking holes in skills. And that's where the research began.
I respect that enormously, which is, let's not sell something because people will buy it. Let's sell something because it's going to do them some good. Let's make sure that we're in a position to do them some good. So what is the impetus for companies to go after skills? I know what mine was when I went after them originally, and this was in 2013 or something. It was a long time ago when I first went after them. And my impetus was a couple-fold. One of them was just this horror at this idea that we bring people into the company. And I used to have this slide that I would share, and it was the photo of at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Ark is filed away by the government into a giant warehouse, and then its label is burned off. And I said, that's what we do when we hire people. We know all this stuff about them when we hire them. And then as soon as we do, we bring them in and we lose them in the giant warehouse. We've got $1 billion going to this asset every year, and we have no idea what's in it, in this warehouse. And so part of it was that. It was just sort of this like, this seems really, really dumb. And the second thing is that it ties so many processes together potentially, which is skills are used for hiring. Skills are used to identify how people need to be trained. Skills are used for career discussions, job descriptions. They're just every place, and they're a mess or they're missing. And so it's just kind of this almost like a tidiness problem for me. But I also think it's a slightly different impetus now. So what is the demand in the market for this?
I think it's changed, Dart, in the last 3 years. And I'll maybe talk about 2 years ago and then what I think today, because they are fundamentally different due to the economic climate. So I think 2 or 3 years ago, skills were seen, and I'm going to use the phrase silver bullet. They were seen as the silver bullet to solve a number of workforce strategy problems. I think you've hit the nail on the head around companies don't know who they have. They don't know their people. They know names on org charts. That's it. Not knowing the actual organization and the people in the organization is a real problem companies are trying to solve for. I think that emanated particularly post-pandemic when we were hiring in fury. We couldn't find people externally. So the focus shone on, okay, who have we got and can we move them around? Can we do more with our people? That was definitely a key impetus early. The other one back 2 years ago, I think, was the realization we need to retain these people we've hired. We need to focus on career development, growth, mobility. We need to give our people a better career experience. And that was a retention play and an attraction play. So I think that the acute talent shortages, the need to attract and retain talent were the key drivers of skills a few years ago. And obviously the advent of AI and inference has really helped, especially the maturity on the vendor side, has made this more possible than when you tried in 2013. I think today I've reframed my problem statement slide significantly. And I think what's now in laser focus by businesses when they're looking at skills is workforce productivity and performance. That is by far the number one reason why companies are looking at this now. It's less ensure retention and career experience and better engagement with our workers is still present. But if we're going to get this strategy across the C-suite endorsement slate, it's about workforce productivity and performance. And that's changed measurably in the last 2 years.
And it's changed measurably in the last 2 years for one reason, I would imagine, is that there's just less money around. And we can't just hire our way out of this, whatever we need. And we can't afford to have a workforce that's not as productive as possible. And so it's just a scarcer money situation, and it drives a need for performance. Who'd you talk to? And who did you find? I don't know where you want to start. If you want to start with detractors or if you want to start with champions. Let's start with detractors.
One of my research pillars was stress testing the strategy of skills itself. So I needed to find people who were not convinced that skills should be the primary focus of a workforce and talent strategy. So I spoke to you. You put me in touch with another ex-colleague who I spoke to. I went looking for people that didn't think it should be a primary focus. I spoke to one of your ex-guests, Aaron from Ghana, who vehemently believes that we should be more focused on work and tasks as a primary focus to solving some of our workforce challenges. You yourself believe that, and I use this expression a lot presenting on this now, Dart. You described it as a male engineering and distant approach to a problem. We're codifying and tagging people so that we can manipulate them at scale. It's a really interesting perspective. So your focus is about designing work experience. That should be the primary focus. I interviewed a really insightful academic in Australia, a guy called Marcus Bowles, who believes that capabilities are what we should be focused on. And actually the board of big companies don't care about skills. They focus more on capabilities.
I don't even know what that sentence means, though. And I'll tell you that I've always tried to avoid what I consider a snarl of definitions, which is skills, capabilities, behaviors. They are hard to parse. And you'll say, oh, well, this is a skill. And somebody will say, no, that's a behavior. And I'm like, I don't know. So what's the difference between a capability? I mean, and really, I'm extremely educated in this in my own head. I think I am. And yet, I don't know the difference between a skill and a capability.
And therein lies the problem with a lot of skills work. I'll use Marcus Bowles because I actually asked him that question and he gave me a really nice answer. So it's one I use quite regularly. A capability is what you build with individual bricks, and the bricks are skills. And the objects that you build with those bricks is the capability. So capability could be digital aptitude, and the skills could be your ability to use something like Excel or generative AI. But the actual broader capabilities is all of those Lego bricks clustered together in one term or one phrase. But you are right in what you say. There is a complete lack of definition that cuts through the industry, and people often use the word skill or capability or behavior interchangeably, and it causes them so much confusion. But I think Marcus's point was, at an organizational level, we probably should care more about capability because that's going to have an organizational impact. Skills are still important. They're at more of an individual level. It's somewhat semantics, but also really important at the same time, because what I was trying to unpack, what I was trying to pick holes in is this well-bandied around tagline that all the consultant firms are using. The skills is the new currency of work. And that means that skills is the primary currency, the primary focus of our attention. And that's what I wanted to pick holes in. Is it? Should it? And that's why I wanted to talk to all these people that were debating that very point itself. And the other detractor that I stumbled across quite early on, it was beautifully timed actually, he was a guy in the US called Mark Efron, who released quite a damning paper in February 24, essentially saying that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It was the title of his paper. And he shared his reports, his research. He too, like me, was very skeptical of all the consulting firms and the HR tech firms. Very, very similar origin to his research. And he just said, it's not worth it. It's a bit of BS. And HR's being drawn to it like a moth to a light. And it's not worth it. They were all really insightful conversations early. But at the same time, I also wanted to speak to people who are on the journey. I took myself off to New York. I attended a key conference where I met a myriad of companies who are on the skills journey from all around the world. The likes of Standard Chartered and MasterCard, and there was HSBC and Telstra from Australia. There's a number of companies there. And I started to connect with those individuals. And I leveraged my network. I was very active on LinkedIn. I tapped people up. Small little consultant in Australia, can I have an hour of your time, NASA? And I got a beautiful intro to the global head of people analytics for NASA and found out, So I've spoken to a lot of companies from Europe, from North America, and from the APAC region, from all different industry sectors, and have been unpacking what they're doing, what they're struggling with, why they're doing it. And everyone's been fantastic to my reach out, and the conversations have been illuminating. And then I stumbled across EPAM systems, which I probably would like to dive into because they're probably the most mature skills-based organization in the world.
I do want to say something about NASA. The thing is that people say skills, but there's a whole bunch of different use cases. And skills are better for some use cases than for other use cases, or capabilities are, whichever you want to say. NASA's was very specific. And there's sort of a question for me of, like, maybe that's a use case that can really work. Theirs was, do we have the skills in NASA today to get people back to the moon? Because you got to figure that what's happened to all the people who put people on the moon, they've aged out. There's probably lots of documentation, but it doesn't mean that we know how to do it still. And it also doesn't mean that we do it the same way anyway that we did it the times before. So he was doing that. And did you get the sense that he was having success?
Yeah, I did. I think that, and actually his problem statement was slightly more extended than that. Yes, we need to get people back to the moon, but obviously the mission is to get people to Mars. So very unknown territory. That's his mission statement. His problem statement is Mars, and the way to get there is via the moon. So David Metzer is his name. He is a self-confessed data geek and approached the problem by building knowledge graphs himself. So he didn't leverage third-party tech. He built his own infrastructure. He built his own taxonomy. He obviously started to unpack that with NASA's people. NASA's a very complex beast because not only do individuals have their work at NASA, but most of those individuals are also doing PhDs and further study and research external to NASA. So the need to understand the people they had is really intense and more complex than a lot of organizations. He obviously started to map the skills of people. He also, at the same time, was building knowledge graphs into their learning ecosystem and applied the same principle of mapping skill to learning interventions at the same time. And it gave him the data that he needed to think about the workforce, both what do we got, where are the gaps, where do we need to build, and have we got what we need to build? He started to bring those two ecosystems together. So it took time, though, to do that because it was built from within, but he has a measure of success with it. They have a great visibility of their people relative to most organizations. They know the size of the problem. Now, skills will be part of the solution to that problem. It won't be all of it. And I think that's a really important takeaway from my research is that skills is a solution to a problem, but it's only part of the solution. In some companies, I usually said it a minute ago, skills may be 20% of the solution. In some companies, it could be 80% of the solution, but it is very rarely 100% of the solution. And I think that's what the market was led to believe. And this whole notion of skills-based organizations is purporting that skills is 100% of the solution. It's not.
First of all, I have a lot of faith in NASA. And a part of the reason is that I was trained in project management by a NASA project manager. And he was one of the project managers for the space station. And imagine this project management problem. You have to know the order of construction of something and the weight and size of every component, because you're going to be sending it up in a launch that has a fixed space and a fixed capacity. And so that's the kind of planning that they had to do, which most companies don't need, but also they don't have time to do that sort of thing. In other words, going to the moon, there seemed to be a time to market problem in that particular case. But putting the space station up, you do it perfectly, you do it once. When it happens may not be quite as important. And so they had lots of time to really think it through. It's one project. And I think that there's a really nice focus to what Dave Meza was working on, which is it's one project. It's a big one, but it's one. What did you find with EPAM?
EPAM is a technology consulting business. They operate globally, heavy in North America and Europe. So when that article, The Juice Isn't Worth the Squeeze, was released, a lady called Sandra Lachlan, who's a beautiful human at EPAM, hopped on it and was quite, I think, offended by it is probably a good word. She didn't say that, but I think offended by it is probably a good expression. And she went out to rebut his article. And she pitched herself to Red Thread Research and got herself on the Workplace Stories podcast series, which I listened to. And I don't think anyone really knew EPAM as a business. They just hadn't really put their head above the parapet, certainly in the skills space. And they were a bit of a hidden gem because they've been doing skills for 30 years. The business was founded with skills at the core to solve a resource management problem. They needed to make sure they had the right skills deployed to the right projects at the right time. And so they basically baked skills into the infancy of the business and have matured their entire business ecosystem around skills. And Sandra explained the journey of EPAM and how they're using skills in rebut to the article. And so I connected with Sandra and I said, hey, I'd love a conversation with you. This sounds amazing. And she very generously gave me some of her time. And I now see EPAM as a beacon of hope and the North Star for skills practitioners globally in terms of what's possible, albeit that EPAM has not had to go through a transformation towards skills.
Because they were born that way.
Because they were born with skills. So Sandra shared on LinkedIn a few weeks ago a video of the architecture, systems architecture at EPAM, and shared how it drives all of their business systems, so with skills at the core, and skills also drive all of their people and HR systems with skills at the core. I have never seen anything like it in any business. And they built their own technology and own infrastructure around skills. So again, they've not leveraged any third party. They're a technology company. They've built their own. So it is quite incredible what they have done. And it is in every single business and HR process. Skills is somewhere in there. And Sandra's on a mission to give hope to skills practitioners of what is possible in this space.
I think IBM got there at one point. I don't know if they're still there. IBM was very militant about everybody completing their skills at the time of hire and keeping that in a database. And I think that consulting companies, the closer you get to being a consulting company, the more your product is your people. And I need to be able to match consultants to the work. And so being able to mix and match, I think, is one. I will admit, I've also seen skills be successful at call routing in call centers. And so knowing who can answer what question, again, the people are very much the customer-facing thing. And so I believe I've seen that be successful. But it's interesting. So there's people who doubt. I'm going to go into my doubts a little bit more because I believe my doubts. There's people who are on the path, and then there's some people who have gotten there. And what's interesting is both of the people who have gotten there, or at least two of them, built their own systems. And there are a handful of things that HR organizations do that I call treadmill work, which is there's a carrot and you can walk toward it forever and you can make a living off of walking toward that carrot forever. I made a living off of walking toward a number of those carrots without ever quite getting to them. So I see certain things as treadmill projects. I think workforce planning very rarely results in a change in the workforce. It results in some nice plans, but it very rarely results in a change in the workforce. And that's just because the workforce plans are not attached to the processes that are going to change who's there. Skills taxonomies are one, as much as I love them. But also with AI, there's a possibility that the cost of taxonomy development and the cost of associating those taxonomies to people could really fall and make it a much more tractable problem. On this show, we've been exploring the principles of multi-sided management, which is the belief that work is a product that every company builds and delivers to employees. This struck a nerve. Work for Humans is in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. And along the way, people began to approach us, asking us how they could put multi-sided management into practice. And they were from all walks of business, line managers and CEOs, 3-person startups and multinationals and universities. But they all shared in common the belief that management practices of the last century are clearly not working. In response to this demand, I've pulled together a small team of some of the best people I have ever had the privilege to work with during my long career, who are also passionate about multi-sided management. And we formed a company 11-fold to serve the need. If you want your employees to feel more alive at work, you want happier teams, lower turnover, and you want tools that traditional management failed to give you to balance the needs of the company and the needs of your teams, let's talk. Employees give your company value it cannot survive without. When you fail to design great work, they will unsubscribe, either by leaving or even worse, by losing the ability to care. Join us at 11fold.com, spelled 11FOLD. Let's change management.
Totally agree. I'm just reflecting, Dart, on your comments about NASA and EPAM having built their own systems. I think there's an important reason why it's worked there, and it's around culture and context. They've been able to build those systems and infrastructure within the culture and context of the organization. So it's super relevant and super aligned strategically. If you're bringing in a third-party technology, it's fraught with lots of problems. And again, I think partly because a lot of companies have seen this, and this is another one of my pillars of research, companies have seen this as a tech play, and it's so not. It is a business transformation / business operating model shift. It's a culture change. It's a ways of working change, of which technology is, 20% of the solution.
Right. The way I've always said that is, it's not a data problem, folks. It's an adoption problem. You can have the right data models. You can have the right data structures. Nobody's going to tell you what their skills are. And if they do, they're going to change. The feasibility of it, it has to be how you live. It has to be really central.
Just on that last point, the Ericsson case, one of the things I learned from Ericsson is they're focused on systematic change, not programmatic change. So they realized that if we treated it like a program, it's more likely to fail, more likely to get underinvested, or if the new exec comes in, they may change strategy and it goes by the wayside. So they went about a systematic change upon introduction and have gradually been baking it into all core processes and all core aspects of the people and talent life cycle so that it endures beyond the current stakeholder group. But it takes more effort. It costs more money. The ROI will be later. But for them, it's a long-term play. It's not a silver bullet to a problem today. And I think there's not enough companies thinking like Ericsson when they're going through the transformation skills.
Yes. So I'm going to say some of my deepest concerns about skills. My deepest concerns are that it sees the workforce as an inventory problem. which I used to do. And I didn't mention the third reason why I worked on skills. It was fun. It was just fun. It's a fun problem, right? In fact, I did a lot of my skills work in my spare time on the weekends, building stuff. The thing of it's not worth the squeeze is a little deeper for me, which is it's the wrong squeeze in the sense that if I could take the money, all the money that I have ever spent working on skills taxonomies and spend it on getting work to people that they're going to enjoy. Skills are not the language. In fact, I recently got in an argument with the chief people officer in public at a conference. And here's how it went. It started off with the person on stage saying that, look, yeah, how employees feel about work is great and everything, but ultimately it's about winning. And essentially, if I can win without treating, this is the continuation of that thought. If I can win without treating people well, thumbs up on that. And I just didn't say anything. I didn't say anything because I was going to wait. But then we got into a data model discussion later in a breakout. And the data model discussion was, well, what really is important here is the work object, which was really interesting. It opened up this box, which was, we need to know what skills are required for the work. So we need a work object that can have skills associated to it. And what I said is, do we have anything associated with that data object that describes the attributes that would tell an employee whether or not they're going to enjoy that work? We don't, because the only arrow of value that we tend to care about is the arrow of value, which is what can you give to the company, not what can the company give to you. And the language of skills is not the language of passion. It's not the language of what people love to do at work. It's the language of what they can do at work. And so if we could just spend the money that we would normally spend on skills on getting work to people that they love, I think we'd get more. And it's the right thing to do as well.
I think, Dart, obviously, I know you're a great proponent of your work for years now and use your language regularly in my consulting work. I think the two are reconcilable. For me, and part of my outtake from my research is that skills is a thing. Firstly, it's not for everyone, and not many companies are ready for it. But it's also a skills and, not skills or strategy.
You're right.
Again, going back to the origin of my research, the focus on becoming skills powered, skills based, over-indexes the focus on skills as the silver bullet. And actually, as I said, it's just part of the solution. So designing appropriate work experience for people or monitoring and measuring energy and people's passion for work is just as important. I think you need both.
I agree. I don't disagree with that at all. With the idea that you both need to create a workforce that can do the work and get work to them that they want to do. I think both of those things are true. And it's often the case, however, that there's a fixed budget and you get to do one or the other. And so then the question becomes, which one is going to be better? That's a false thing that I just said. The reason it's false is it's not just those two things. It's not like those two things.
It's myriad of other
40 things. Yeah.
But I think one thing, Dart, we've seen in corporates in the last 5 years that I've never seen as much spend on leadership and leadership development as I'm seeing at the moment. And I think having better leaders in business will create better work for people and better experiences of careers. But it is also needed for the skills world as well, because we've got to rewire a whole cohort of leaders into a new way of thinking and a new way of managing and developing talent. Their role is not to go and acquire skills and deploy them into work. They've got to develop and nurture and coach and build talent from within. And I actually think that the skills movement and that leadership movement is so well aligned to what you're trying to achieve in the work that you're doing. I think the skills movement will fuel your ecosystem and the work that you're doing. We have to have build. We have to have coaches. We have to have people that really care about their people and their careers. The technology and the skills data is informing a lot of that. But I think when we mature that leader layer, your world and my world come very close together.
Yes, I think that makes sense. So that's one cultural change. that when you talk about systemic change and the systemic change that needs to happen, one part of the systemic change is we're not just moving people around like inventory and widgets. We're growing people, and we're using this as a way to grow people. And it's a part of our job to grow people. And that's a part of what leadership needs to understand. And grow, not in the sense of build people like machines, but grow them like living things. And skills or capabilities can be the vocabulary that we use to understand where and when we need to do that.
I think, Dart, if I reflect on the lines and things that you talk about that I use very regularly, is the inverted org chart. And the leader is the root system and the foundation, and their workers are the rest of the tree. I actually see the skills being the leaves on the tree in many ways, or that could be an analogy. But we are building people to take work opportunity through skills. And skills is just one thing, obviously. There's a whole range of other stuff we're building. But that's where I think your world and the skills world really, if they collide, I think the world would be a better place.
That works perfectly with the metaphor. And it's also true that in all my work on what job do people hire their jobs to do for them, one of the most common answers is to, I'm going to just have a broad category of things I want to transform myself. And that transformation can be, I want to learn, I want new certifications, I want a better resume, I want a degree, I want to be a better human, people will say. And so there's a whole range of things where helping people to understand what to reach for, I can see that. There's one other little limitation here, which is that having worked on skills taxonomies, one of the things about skills taxonomies is that they tend to be finite. And why is that? Well, because what do companies do? They set out to identify all the things that they know they need. So they create a taxonomy that is company shaped. But when I have had career discussions with people as a whole human, I remember one time I was talking to somebody, and one of the things that I thought she needed to learn was forgiveness for her own career growth. And why was that? Well, because she was developing a list of executives who she hated. And you just can't keep developing that list in a company and not run out of people you want to work with. And so forgiveness was something that I thought this person really needed to learn. Well, that's not going to be on any taxonomy. And so one of the things I think we might be able to do with AI is say, let's not actually have a skills taxonomy. Let's just have words. Let's just have attributes.
Totally agree with you. So I've been using this year, Dart, a hashtag more than skills. So if you think about most of the HR tech vendors in this space, they're kind of myopically focused on mostly technical skill words. And a couple of points on what you commented on there. Obviously, the benefit of some of these platforms is that it's beyond the company. So these platforms are ingesting skills from the open market and sensing new skills emerging and bringing them into the taxonomy. So one of the benefits of the external platforms is this ever-evolving ecosystem of skills that they are giving to a company, which I think is a huge benefit. But it is mostly geared around technical hard skills. And I've always said to the vendors, you need to go and buy a XYZ assessment product so we can bring some human-centric power skills in, because they are equally as important as the technical skills. And if we want a full view of a person, we want to have those as well as the technical. And I think in lieu of that happening, it comes back to the role of leader and career conversations and what makes the magic career conversation. It is about the human and about the technical. And it goes back to my comments about if the leader's made of the right stuff and views their role as a career coach, or if you have people in the talent function whose role is as a career coach, then we can make this work. I actually think I've spoken to a couple of products that are working on some new breed of assessments that are academically researched and valid, but are leveraging AI to assess for the power skills, the human skills. Now, we don't have that at the moment, but when that comes, I think there'll be another taxonomy of words that'll be applicable to the human dimension. And you bring that in with the technical stuff, I mean, that's then getting really exciting.
Yeah, you have one slide that I recall. It's a slide about you. It says, "Who am I?"
Yes.
There's the LinkedIn version of you, there's the Facebook version of you, and then you say the hidden version of you, but I think it's the whole version of you. Is that all of you? If we collected it all in one place, could a company use it? I guess is my question. So first of all, what's the difference between the LinkedIn version of you and the Facebook version of you? And especially, what's the hidden version of you?
People love this slide, Dart. For context for your audience, I use it to firstly introduce myself at a presentation. And secondly, to introduce the notion of hashtag more than skills. And the LinkedIn version of me is the most boring version of me. It's what you see publicly. It's my work, my job title, my domain, and my skills. It's my LinkedIn version. And there's a nice cheesy corporate picture of me, but it doesn't really tell you very much about me, the human. It's me, the worker. The Facebook version of me is a little bit more interesting. Well, I think so. It's a bit more rich about me as an individual, my life, my family, my kids, where I live, my passions, my love of sports, my exercise, my slight addiction to Tasmanian whiskey. But it gives you more color as to who I am as a human. And then the hidden version of me you won't find online. I don't share openly. It has what I deem to be my purpose, which is to inspire others and to challenge boundaries. It has my career drivers, what matters to me, probably the answers to your question that you ask lots of people, Dart. But it also has my vulnerabilities, the fact that I've suffered from bouts of quite big anxiety. I suffered from high stress. I hate flying, even though I seem to be on a plane every second week. Perversely, I hate public speaking. So it has my vulnerabilities and things that I don't like to share and expose. But it's where, if you reflect on work and career, it's kind of where the magic happens in the conversation. If you only have a career conversation about the LinkedIn version of you, skills, it's very narrow. It's very narrow and it's not going to get to the right outcome. It's important, but you need to have a conversation as fast as the whole version of you or the hidden version of you as possible. And not everyone's going to be happy to talk about this stuff. And not every company's got the culture for it to be accepted to talk about this stuff. But if you can, then that's where the magic happens in the world of work. And so for me, the LinkedIn version is just the skills bit, but we need more than that to make the world of work better for the people in it. So that's the reason I use that slide.
I'll tell you what's so interesting about those three versions. The LinkedIn version is the way we talk to companies about what we can do for them. The hidden version of you is a lot more about what you want from the company. It's not exclusively that, but a lot of what you just talked about is the job you hire your job to do for you, to challenge boundaries and inspire others, and to some extent, the cost of work. You don't like flying or public speaking, and every week there's a LinkedIn of you in some other part of the world public speaking. But it's worth it to you or you wouldn't be doing it. And so you're getting enough value in your ability to challenge boundaries and inspire others that is worth the cost. And then the Facebook version of you, I don't know where that fits in because it's not quite either of those things. It's not what you want from work. It's fun. It's what you think is fun.
I think you could say it's fit. It's fit. It's culture. It's the alignment to organization or team. It's probably, if you're thinking of it in those views, it is probably more this is me, who I am, and how I will present at work. We used to hire for culture fit. It's probably something around that.
Now, I'll tell you one thing that's maybe in these, but not obviously. Just this last week, I interviewed David Obstfeld, and he's somebody who looks at social network analysis. And what he pointed out was that the success of people in a situation is not entirely an attribute of them. It's an attribute of the social network in which they reside. And this is like another example of something I think is often a waste of time. But when he talks about it, I actually really came away believing in it, which is that who you are is not 100% predictive of your success. It's also how you're connected into the world and how the world sees you And it's a bunch of things that are not attributes of you. They're attributes of the system in which you're working. And I found it very compelling.
I totally agree with that, Corinne. I mean, I'm just reflecting over my career and life, how that's probably changed as well and become probably more, not more important, but more visible. When I was 18, I was a product of a comprehensive state school in England in a pretty nondescript city in the middle of the country and came from a relatively working class background. Now, all of those labels and all of that led to perception when I was applying for jobs post-uni, or led to whether I got accepted into certain universities or not. Nowadays, it's magnified because we have this enormous online digital footprint. But I totally agree with that sentiment. We know that China's building its social credit system where it's racing its populace at the moment.
It's rating, yeah.
Yeah. So it's becoming more magnified and more AI driven and more data driven. But we've always had it in society, but it's just now in a different dimension to what we've had previously.
Yeah. Yeah. That, by the way, is a super weird situation. It's really dystopian to me, which is this idea that we're going to give you a social rating. We now know absolutely everything about you in China. We know everything about everything you do. That's too much information for us to actually consume and use. And so we're going to let AIs do it. And the AIs are going to sort and filter people based upon this data and put people into buckets of high reputation or low reputation. Yikes.
But no different to how the class system worked in the UK or how the caste system operates in India.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a different construct.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So I've asked you this question before in past conversations about what you hire your job to do for you and what it costs you. And you have it already delineated. So I guess my question is it changing? Which is, in the past, you have said challenge boundaries and inspire others. Is it changing?
It has changed, Dart. So several years ago now, I went to the US to a conference and met people from the infrastructure business that were developing Bridge, their career platform. And I met this wonderful guy called Steve who gave me a pack of cards and he played a game with me. It was probably the best career conversation I've ever had. And the game of cards and the conversation distilled my major career drivers. And every 12 months, I get that pack of cards out. I have them in the cover next to me here. And I play that game, admittedly with myself, but to see how much it shifted. And the career drivers actually answer your question. And I actually did this, I don't know, it was probably about 4 months ago. And adventure is still a key driver. I want to travel. I want to meet people. I want to have adventure. I want to do new stuff. I want to build my personal knowledge and expertise. That's remained. That's remained really important to me. And as part of a job of consultant, I see value in that. It's a key driver. I need to be able to build that. My number one driver is actually impact, which is probably linked to that purpose of challenge boundaries, inspiring others. I actually want to have impact on my team and my clients and the broader world of work. I want to have an impact. I want to have a voice.
By the way, impact is why skills were something that you had to know whether they could work, because you didn't want to sell something that didn't create impact. So this is a perfect example. And you could learn your way into it through intellectual adventure. It's a very nice fit.
It's a great example, actually, Dart. The skills work's taken me to New York, Stockholm, Paris, let alone the stuff we've been doing domestically this year. By default, my research is fulfilling my career ambitions. I think the one thing that's probably shifted a little bit is, and it's probably as I'm getting a bit older, but I'm also thinking about my business beyond me. What is it? Is it going to be a business beyond me? If so, what's the legacy? How's that going to happen? That's definitely started to appear in my thinking more than, well, certainly 5 years ago. I'm 53. I want the business. I want something here beyond me. So there's an element of legacy starting to creep into my work. But my career drivers have been relatively stable. The core ones, relatively stable. But they probably shifted a little bit in the rank order of those.
You used the word career drivers. How different are they from life drivers?
great question, actually. They're not for me. And I think that's partly due to running your own business. I've been work and life blur all the time for me. I'm not an employee. I'm not working for a business. I do what I do because I love what I do. But I think, though, Dart, one thing I would comment on that, I've also reflected, and something my brother said to me several years ago, he sees me as a striver. I've been striving, and partly because of my background and where I came from, I've been striving to prove to someone or myself something, and spent 25 years doing it. And it's come at a high cost. Talked about anxiety and stress earlier. And actually now I need to focus more on thriving. And I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I'm not in that mindset anymore. So that has definitely shifted in the last few years. And so there's now more focus on me and me thriving and not striving. I think that's a really big shift in my thinking.
That's beautiful. First of all, thank you very, very much for arriving at a place where you were ready to talk about your research. I think it's really fantastic what you've done looking into it. And I think that you showed me a more broad-minded way to think about the space of skills, which is it's easy to get reactionary. I'm a little bit reactionary. So broadening it out and saying that it can be something that, when done right, can be valuable, not just for the company, but for the people in the company. And that's very, very encouraging. And it changed my mind. Where can people learn more about you, about TQ? Where do they go?
Best place is LinkedIn. I'm a prolific LinkedIn poster. I set up a skills newsletter, which you'll find via my LinkedIn, where I release a monthly paper on stuff from my research. So we do share an awful lot via that channel. That is probably the best place. I'd love people to follow and connect and engage and participate in the discussion. I'd love to hear from some detractors. Love to hear from those who are succeeding with this, having challenges with this. But that is definitely the best place to go.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been fantastic having you on the show.
Oh, Dart, it's awesome to be on the show. So thank you.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Work for Humans. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And share the show with one person you think would get value from it. Believe it or not, this really helps us grow the show and reach more people who want to build the kind of work that people really want. As always, thank you to my producer, Jason Ames at Ninth Path Audio, for his insights into content and his high standard for quality. Final note, the opinions shared here are my own and not the views of Google or Cisco Systems. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.